Our competition aren't other sports. Our competition is attention. One of the most important thing about our league is that we average 20 million views organically per event. Our dream is to kind of
Meet Paul Rigault, the founder and CEO of the DØDS Diving League, a visionary sports entrepreneur who has spent nearly 2 decades transforming a Norwegian poolside pastime into a globally recognized freestyle diving competition. He is also the driving force behind the sport's first official World Series.
We're similar to UFC in the sense that we own the IP of the sport. So we own DØDS Diving, we own the World Series, the World Ranking, the World Championship, the trademark, the categories. It's a very exciting case because we own the actual whole ecosystem. You can't force growth. You need to have grassroots community building it step by step. You need stickiness within your fans because the attention span is just like new stuff happening every day.
What keeps you up at night? What is the biggest risk that you see? On the other hand, what is the biggest opportunity that you see? Good to see everyone. Thank you for joining on the Berkira podcast again. Today's conversation, I think, is a very interesting one and differentiated. As you know, we try and cover themes at the intersection of sports, media, and entertainment. And so I'm delighted to have today joining us the CEO and founder of the DØDS Diving League, Paul Rigault. Paul, great to have you on. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thank you. Pleasure being here.
Paul, I mean, as I said, obviously we try and keep this as conversational as possible, and hopefully, our listener can enjoy the conversation as well. So to start with, perhaps, it would be good to have a little bit of an introduction about what is the DØDS Diving League? What is DØDS diving? Can you talk a little bit more about the sport and perhaps let people understand why this new league and why the sport is growing so fast in the Nordics, in Norway and other countries?
Yeah, of course. So the DØDS Diving League is the official governing body of freestyle diving. So we are the official World Series and host also the official World Championship at the end of the season. So consisting of 5 events this season and fully aired on ESPN as our first year going to the US.
Does DØDS differ from traditional diving, or is there any sort of a particular things to keep in mind?
Yeah, so I would call it the rebellious cousin of traditional diving. So much like snowboarding changed skiing in the 90s at the Winter Olympics and kind of introduced a whole new generation to winter sports, we're doing the same to aquatic sports. So you have on one side this unchanged Olympic sport for over 120 years, and suddenly comes this whole new generation built with social media in its DNA and have total different needs for entertainment than previous generations. So our sport is by far a social media sport.
Excellent. Well, that I think it's a great momentum from that perspective, given everything that is going on also on the creative side. But maybe we touch on that a little bit later. Of course, I think everybody enjoys watching diving. I live in the UK, as you know, there are some very famous diving champions. But I guess one of the things is, how do you find the right talent for this league? And also, why do you think is the right moment to start, building the league?
And then that's actually a great question because the evolution of the sport was fairly natural. It kind of grew up from a grassroots movement. So half of our athletes come from traditional diving and the other half come from every action sport in the world, being surfing, skateboarding, parkour, trampoline, whatever, because in general, the tricks are the same. It's just a unique landing. So we're just introducing a whole new kind of energy into a traditional sport, just tailor-made for a whole new generation. So I think the talent pipeline in the future as well, we will see traditional diving still existing, just like in snowboarding, you still have alpine skiing and cross-country skiing and all that stuff. We just wanted to be added within that family. So we want to be a part of aquatic sports and the future, a future fan Olympic.
Right. And if I'm not mistaken, Paul, when we first interacted, you mentioned that this is one of the most practiced sports in the Norway, right? Or one of the sports with the longest history. So perhaps good to touch base a little bit on the history of DØDS.
Yeah, so just like you're saying, if you go out during the summer in Norway, this is what every kid is doing. So you go to the local community pool or you go in the south, in the fjords, this is what kids do. And it started as a sport born in Norway in the 70s, and it kind of blew up with our generation, and then it got readapted with Gen Z and Gen A. So we had our first event here back in 2008, and it's kind of very organically progressed, and then it grew out from Norway to the Nordics. So now you see the same tendency in Sweden, you see the same in Denmark, and then little by little you see this starting to get adapted in France, Germany, UK, and now since 2022 in the US.
Well, look, I mean, I guess every league has that moment when it kind of goes from concept to, first events and then eventually, becoming something a little bit more real. So I guess, from your perspective, you mentioned that in 2008, it kind of started to have a little bit of the first events. But when did you realize that it could be more than just, an event here and there?
I think from the athletes' side, because it grew so organically, the international community also got built. And with that also came an increased interest of having competitions. So in the beginning, we only had the World Championship at the end of the season. And then we randomly started building competitions for fun. And then in 2022, we decided to start the official World Series and the league. And everything that we do is in collaboration with the athletes. So we're a very kind of knit community, just like snowboarding and skateboarding and surf has been historically built very from kind of an athlete's first kind of perspective. So the main reason why we wanted to have events was because we wanted to have fun together. And little by little, that structure became a series.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, I guess you hit the nail on the head, right? In terms of some of the things that are important to have a successful league, right? Athletes. I guess also, you also have teams, right? If I'm not mistaken, you mentioned that you also are very much involved at the moment managing teams. So much to think about, right? So how important were in your case, athletes, the teams, perhaps the calendar structure, and then maybe we'll leave it for the next topic, talking a little bit more about distribution.
I think you're tapping into maybe the most important part and a DNA in DØDS diving. It's athletes first. So my number two, which is Stille Brun Keldas, he was a silver winner in Nagano in snowboarding and was 3 times world champion. She kind of went through that whole history with snowboarding, kind of meeting the federation, grassroots, professionalizing a sport that was rebellious. So we're trying to kind of flip that upside down and do it athlete first. So we're involving the athletes in everything that we do. And one of the things that the athletes wanted was starting to compete in teams. So that's actually a transition we piloted last year where we organized 8 teams. So you could compete as an independent or you can compete as a team. And this year we kind of flipped it on its head and we're now introducing 10 new teams. So you'll always have an event winner, meaning an independent winner of the competition, just like in Formula One. And then you'll have a team podium as well.
Got it. So how many people in each team?
So 2 divers per team.
Okay. So similar to F1, regular.
Yeah, no. So it's very similar. So maybe the biggest kind of rival you have is your teammate, but at the same time, you're still representing a team, which is a really cool thing. And something that we're kind of adding this year is that the initial rounds are just on points, but the quarterfinals and the semis are knockout rounds. So you'll have 1 team winner and 1 team loser for every round, which kind of makes it so much more dramatic for the spectators.
And how do you score the diving? I mean, who scores the diving? How do you win? How do you come on top of your teammates or the other competition?
Yeah, so it's very, very similar to snowboarding bigger competitions. So you have 1 to 10 points. You have 5 judges. You have 1 doing the in-run, meaning the power out of the tower. 1 doing the technical jump. 1 doing the landing. So you have this unique DØDS landing, maximizing the splash. And then you have a STEES judge, which is called style. And then you have 1 overall judge. And then you have decimals, 0.1 decimals for each judge.
Got it. And did you compete, Paul? Have you ever competed? Have you ever, is this a sport that you practice or a sport that you manage?
No, I'm getting too old, but I definitely know how to dodge dive. But with these kids now, everything is getting so there's so many flips, so many grabs, so
Yeah,
many
yeah,
rotations. But I do a decent dodge, and I started getting fear of heights a couple of years ago, and I've kind of started the dodging again. It's so empowering because it doesn't make any sense doing a chicken race towards the water and doing tricks in the air. But once you kind of go up from the water afterwards, you feel like a rock star.
yeah. No, amazing, amazing. And look, I mean, obviously, thank you for, giving us a little bit more details to understand, how the league actually work. But I think, as you were saying at the very beginning of the podcast, you were mentioning how this is a sport for, the new generation, Gen Z and whoever. But, I guess, one of the key things why it's so relatable to younger demographic is because of the distribution methods, right? So perhaps we should talk a little bit about how you've been thinking about distribution, format innovation in terms of production, and how do you make sure that basically the content, the product ultimately is interesting, right? Because that's been quite a topic, I'd say, recently in new leagues, right? I mean, it's not just about having the sport, but you also need to make sure you got the right product, and I'll come back to this.
Yeah, and I think it's a very important topic. And in our league, it kind of grew organically because it was kind of reborn with Gen C and Gen A. So they had everything so natively incorporated within the sports. But you're totally right. Our competition aren't other sports. Our competition is attention. And one of the most important thing about our league is that we average 20 million views organically per event, and 2/3 of that are distributed through our athletes. So what we do during an event is that we have a broadcasting team, and then we have a content team, and that content team share everything with the athletes. So we have drone flights, we have GoPro cams, we have a very kind of young media product, and then the athletes, they make their edits, they want to kind of see their jump, they share everything. And then with 13 million followers through our athletes, we have a mass distribution in-house. So that's kind of our primal engine within the league.
Absolutely, great. Well, and how do you actually produce the content? Is this something that you use your own people, or you use third parties?
Yeah, so designing a media product that kind of hits young, it's difficult. So through the last kind of 15 to 20 years, we kind of adapted. We know who's best on GoPro sticks. We know who's best on drone. And we have this huge team of freelancers that we collaborate with every year, and that knows the athlete, so they can go very close without kind of threatening them. And we do know that everything that we do film has a potential of going viral. So we have that kind of focus on everything that we shoot. And I think also one of the coolest things is that we're now actually transitioning over to a linear. So we're having our first season on ESPN this season. And one of the things that we're taking into that broadcast is that Gen C, Gen A kind of a dynamic filming with the drones, the GoPro sticks, the rhythm, because we know that that stuff hits young. And in last year, when we piloted the first televised season, 1/3 of the viewership was under 30, which was a whole new record just because it's structured so differently.
1/3 of the viewership was under 30. And what about geographically? What's the split? Do you have any data on that you can share? How the
Yeah. So we have the majority of our kind of viewership is between 13 and 34. So we have Gen C and Gen A. That's kind of over 70 for our demographic, and it's male dominant, which is very typical for action sports. So we have almost 85% male viewership.
Yeah. Okay. And obviously, there's always some good growth, wins, and obviously some challenges. I guess, when you think about what's been happening to date, what are you most proud of, but similarly, one is that has been, let's say, tougher than expected in terms of, working on developing the DØDS Diving League.
Yeah, so I think in some ways we're kind of writing history here. Norway has never, ever made a summer sport before, so we're the ninjas of the Nordics and everything that's skiing, but it's because it's cold up here, we have so much snow. But for us to build a summer sport from scratch, and with that legacy of kind of the sport being born in Norway back from the 70s, it was about peacocking from the 10 meter, picking up girls at the local community pool, and now suddenly this becoming the platform for freestyle diving and the official World Series, that's a huge mark for us. And we see it only this year. We had 7 of our divers guesting TV shows, motion pictures. So it's also becoming a part of popular culture here in the Nordics. So I think that's kind of the piece that I'm most proud of, that we're actually building a proper global sport coming from Norway. But at the same time, it takes time. So I started the World Championship. The first one was in 2008, and now we're in 2026, and kind of I'm still in the game. We're still building this, now building it a collegiate tour in 27 in the US. So it feels kind of, it has all these kind of chapters where we kind of redefine ourselves and just like go full throttle.
Yeah. I think that's one thing that sometimes people can underestimate, right? The time it takes. And to be fair, I guess, it's impossible not to get there at the end, right? I mean, we've had a very recent example with Rigault, something that, has been well funded and sponsored for, 5 years, right, at least? And suddenly, it looks like, well, it doesn't look like, actually, PIF is basically announced that they're withdrawing support, or financial support, at least. Is there any sort of takeaway from there? Is there any sort of, do you think that's going to be, creating some more question marks, or how do you go about, differentiating what happened there versus, how you've been building the DØDS Diving League?
Yeah, and I think you're maybe coining what's kind of important for new emerging leagues going ahead. And I think that you can't force growth. You need to kind of have a grassroots community building it step by step, and well understanding that the PGA Tour, it took how many years to build, the NFL, how many years to build. So you need that kind of, so even in times where kind of things goes viral, fandom, it's easier because you have a way of accessing people. You need stickiness within your fans, because the attention span is just like new stuff happening every day. But what you actually need is proper fans. You need people wanting to travel to these events, to follow their teams season after season. So we kind of learned the hard way that you can't buy yourself out of it. You need to actually build it, and that takes time.
Yeah, absolutely. And time and a little bit of capital as well, right? But I guess, the key point that we got is that, even if theoretically you got a lot of capital available, doesn't mean that you can create the right dynamics, let's say, right? And one of the things that I think people, I was reading a little bit about, some of the commentators, talking about what has been challenging for maybe has been, the fact that the product wasn't there, because maybe the course where, the competition wasn't as difficult as it is in the Ryder Cup because of the course they chose or whatever. So do you think about that as well, in the case of the DØDS Diving League, and making sure that, the product continues to get improved? Do you think there has been that improvement, and how, do you measure that?
Yes, and I think that's maybe one of the most important questions, and it has taken us time to understand kind of how to build a scalable model. So what we're doing is like, okay, we understood how to build events. So we're kind of transitioning from events now becoming a media platform, and in the future building the IP. But one of the most exciting things that we are doing going ahead is the collegiate tour, because one of the most scalable products that we have are existing diving pools throughout the world. So every city in the world or college in the world has a 10-meter platform with a diving arena, and they have a federation, they have diving clubs, they have athletes, they have fans. So for us, starting to introduce this competition style within aquatics, swimming clubs, water rugby clubs, diving clubs, and starting that spark in 27 is going to be a super exciting chapter for the league, because I do think that within the next 4 to 5 years, this will become an Olympic challenger. So we're aiming for 2032. And I think that's going to happen through the collegiate tour.
And sorry, what do you think will happen in 2032?
Olympics? Becoming a trial sport for the Olympics.
Trial sport for the Olympics. So trial sports meaning you will actually be at the Olympics?
So we are in conversation now with consultants on how to go to market with it. It's not our core kind of focus. Our core focus is to build collegiate tour and the pro tour. So building a 6 to 7 months season and televising that season, that's kind of the main focus. But with that also comes a new generation of fans and a new generation of athletes. And like you saw in the Olympics last time, with breakdancing becoming a sport, with snowboarding blowing up at the end of the 90s, suddenly these sports are having so much more traction than the traditional sports. So our dream is to kind of coexist within the aquatic segments in the Summer Olympics in 2032 as a trial sport, and then in the future be a kind of a fan favorite, just like snowboarding.
Great. Paul, look, thank you very much for sharing the vision. And, I think that's super interesting. And I think a lot of people will, gather a lot of understanding on how you've been building this. I guess it'd be useful if you can to also give us a little bit of information around the business model to date, right? How important are, sponsorship versus media versus ticketing? How do you drive basically, potential revenue here? And is this overall a capital intensive business? How you've been funding it to date?
Yeah, so our events are host city funded, meaning that a host city, we meet them through 3 to 4 conferences each year. And then a host city pays a license. We come to the host city with the competition, the athletes, and the media production. And then the host city is the event organizer in itself. So that's a scalable model, but it's a very heavy model because it takes 2 to 3 years to land contracts. The commercial cycles are 3 years. So the whole goal is to use those 3 years to mirror media distribution, meaning TV and streaming services, and then you mirror that with commercial partners. So today, sponsorship, media, and host city funding is the key model. And then the goal in the next phase now is to build reach within our own platforms and monetize that through sponsorships. So that's kind of the second stage of it. And then the third stage is start looking at team franchising and licensing of the IP.
So it sounds like there's going to be evolution from, let's say a league to a media business to potentially an IP platform. Does that sound fair?
That's correct. And I think one of the most unique thing about DØDS Diving League is that we're similar to UFC in the sense that we own the IP of the sport. So we own DØDS Diving, we own the World Series, the World Ranking, the World Championship, the trademark, the categories. So it's a very exciting case because we own the actual whole ecosystem. Yeah. And we also we just launched 2 months ago, the Junior League, and now we're tapping into the collegiate tour in 27. And then we have the Pro Tour. And then the fourth vertical is going to be a team franchising.
So how many athletes compete now? And can you give us some indication of, let's say, absolute audiences? What are we talking about at the moment?
Yeah, so typically for a competition, you have 40 athletes, and out of them, 20 of them are organized through teams. But within our federation, we have over 750 active divers with a 50% increase year by year the last 3 years.
Wow, that's cool. And in terms of audience, can you give us some indication at the moment? What sort of figures, you can reach, you can achieve, perhaps including the digital media channels?
Yes, I think one of the most exciting thing is that now we have athletes from over 30 countries. So I think it's starting to really be cemented. So even if the US is by far having the biggest growth, we're now starting to see Germany popping up. We start to see UK, Italy, Spain, and Asia. That's kind of a super exciting direction. We really want to try Korea in the future and Japan. So there are so many countries where a body of water and peacocking from heights makes sense. So for us, tapping into these diving venues, I saw this last week in Japan, you have a diving venue with over 10,000 seats. Imagine having it there. So that's a super exciting thing. But from a figure perspective, per season, we average 100 and 120 million views organically, which is huge.
Yeah.
From live on ESPN and our own streaming platforms, we average 1.5 to 2 million views. So that's more kind of the long format minutes.
Good.
So we are already today a huge window for sponsors.
Absolutely. Those are some, very relevant numbers. So Paul, look, if everything goes right, where does it go? Or, let's say, what do you think success looks like for the next 5 to 10 years?
The dream would be kind of to have the full ecosystem built out and then build a licensing model so we can see the franchise go in new territories, but focusing on the US first. And I'm especially excited about the collegiate tour. I just came back from Vegas last week, attending the Peak conference.
Yeah.
And it got so much traction. And you have so many of these players also having a footprint in Vegas. So the big dream would be to have the big finals of the collegiate tour in Vegas, and that also being the start of the Pro Tour. And once that playbook is kind of deployed, start doing that in the Middle East, Asia, Africa, South America, and then suddenly you have a proper World Series.
Got it. Well, look, I mean, you were at Peak, and I'm sure, you would have spoken to a few other people that, were looking to launch a league or something similar. So, what is the thing that people misunderstand the most about building a sports league?
You need to figure out the scalability. So for us, building huge kind of world tour event, it's a very resource intensive work. And we figured out the way to scale it once we figured out that we have available venues, meaning all the diving facilities in the world. So for us to bring the party to the pool, bring a DJ, bring the banners, the branding, the feeling, the vibe, the athletes, is a fairly cost-effective competition structure. So we can do that based on existing ecosystems, but we can build the distribution. So there you have full scalability throughout the world. And I think that all leagues in the world need to figure out how to build an ecosystem that you can actually scale, and making sure that you have interesting characters enough to drive that narrative. Because that's the whole thing about the DØDS Diving League.
Yeah.
Get addicted not only to the sport, but to these crazy people traveling around the world, exploring new cliffs, getting to know how they get to know new cultures. And I think that's maybe one of the most interesting things that you also saw in early skate and surf and snowboarding was it's a vibe. You can't copy that stuff, man. It's so addictive and you want to be a part of it, and the culture of it. It's such a huge thing that we do believe that this kind of is definitely a similar wave to the sports that I just mentioned.
Yeah. Look, Paul, I mean, this has been incredibly useful and interesting, and very much. Thank you very much for also, giving us your passion into this conversation. Really transmitting your passion. I want to finish with a couple of quick questions, if I can. One is, what keeps you up at night? What is the biggest risk that you see? On the other hand, what is the biggest opportunity that you see, and maybe, is potentially again underestimated?
Money. It's always money, because you need money to build. And just mentioned earlier, so we're by far one of the kind of cheapest league out there, but we're also one of 10 leagues being kind of monitored now by VCs and family offices. But we're raising capital now, so we just started our seed round, so we hope to close in July this year. So that's kind of something that's important for me, and then I have to go out of the operational side of the business.
Good. Well, Paul, really enjoyed the conversation. I think it's really fascinating to see, not just what DØDS itself is doing, but also how you need to think about, growing a sport, and what are some of the key takeaways. I think would be, super interesting for whoever has been listening. I think, what you talked about, format innovation, media, managing, growing the athletes representation, the importance of the creators, maybe, how important they are effectively becoming as creators. It's going to be something that whoever is thinking about building a league will need to focus on. So many thanks again for coming on, and thanks to everyone for listening. And please, do let us have your comments, and don't hesitate to reach out to myself or Paul to learn more.
No, I appreciate it, Massimo. Thank you so much.
Thank you.